the most interesting thing to me is like learning when what do other people consider blocking comments and what
Yeah,
you know what other people consider non-blocking comments.
yeah, yeah. That's something that comes up where I've got something I want to add to it, but I don't want the reviewer to think, ah, this is blocking. We have to.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
That's a huge topic.
It is a huge topic. Hey Chow, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm
I'm
here
doing
to learn.
that's good. But also
Yes.
share if you have something interesting going on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Because we're all here to learn. And
we're
if we
all
all
here
show up to learn, we could walk away with nothing because everyone's just observing and waiting to learn.
to. Yeah.
Um,
Um, Also, Cos, thank you for the review the other day.
oh, is this the interesting review that you're sharing, Cos?
I had a community contribution that turned out to be interesting, but it's more interesting in the code coupling questions. But you have the first point, Paul.
I
You
do.
share that.
Yeah, let me share this. Uh, yeah, I've set a timer. Okay, I get them. Um, in a little bit, I'll need to pull something out of the oven and throw it at my children so they can scurry around it and be fed. Yeah, let me share my screen. Let me close my email and close my Slack, which uh I have inadvertently shared my email and had, people ranting to me on Slack on recorded calls, which are like, okay, these aren't the best. All right. There's this there was this MR. And so something interesting has happened in my life these days where I'm no longer just reviewing front end. I'm also reviewing the test and back end. Um, and so I get pinged a lot sometimes to just review the tests. And uh, that's cool and fun. But this one, what got stuck in my head was that it was like walking through the UI to do everything, every step of the test would like, and would do like multiple page visits. So we would add a new child, and this wasn't doing anything in the database side. This would actually walk through the UI to add a new child and then do some expectations and then do another UI thing and do expectations. So there, um, and so my thought was, these feature tests, we don't necessarily, these aren't necessarily supposed to be like black box tests, and we are concerned about the speed of these tests. Um, like these were written almost like a QA test that's like just hitting the UI. And so there's another level of our testing pyramid, which is our actual end-to-end QA tests. And so I just wasn't sure if like, are we are we testing too much at this level? I know with myself on the web ID side, we've gotten pinged about slow tests before. And I just wanted to make sure we weren't run into that situation. So my question was, uh, yeah, was each test was doing a lot, and then thinking about splitting it up and using more of these, more of the factories to create stuff rather than using the UI. Cassie was really concerned though about we want to test this stuff in the UI because it sounds like while they're developing it, they're running into issues. So then that's when I was like, okay, I don't know what our preference is here, so let me ask an actual test engineer and we'll do it. I did see this thing about in the docs, and I think this is interesting, but it's about feature tests. and it is I guess what we call feature tests, they're also calling system tests. But it's basically saying consider not writing it and reasons when we might not want to have one. And namely this note of like, it's very easy to add tests. It's a lot harder to remove or improve them. And so adding too many slow and duplicated tests can have a cost. Even though, we do want to test things. But it looks like Desiree hopped on, and she had an interesting takeaway, being that some of the tests might be better suited. But her main reason for keeping them as they were, at least for now, was that it looks like the feature is being worked on heavily. And there was very recent bugs around this. So like, since this is an active development and they were running into issues, it's like, okay, just for right now, we need this harness. And I can totally see that and get that. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I'd be curious to know how you all would have handled it, or what your thoughts on this kind of situation is.
That's really interesting, guys. I do bias towards having more tests. I'm a bit greedy there. I think they can quickly cover a lot functionality that we sometimes might not cover in the unit tests. One thing I've been thinking about for a long, that maybe we could have component tests that would cover applications, like maybe on the front end, that would run in a mock environment, but they wouldn't require the database to spin up, the purpose server to spin up. And maybe that would be those would be still UI tests that won't be the end-to-end one, but it would be UI tests that would ensure that the at least the front-end logic works when we mock some backend. We started a kind of experiment with the storybook stories for front-end applications. So we run a storybook with the fully mocked backend, and all the environments is mocked, but we don't run tests against that. There is currently discussion open for HR, please.
I'm gonna
there's
step
an
away
open
real
discussion.
fast.
Yeah, feed the children. That's the first thing. Chao, you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a thought. As soon as you said feed the children, I was gone. But the other thought I had here, I want to ask a question. So this is my 4th week, so a lot of the things I don't really know. When we do Storybook, there is a testing we can do. Is you basically do a snapshot of a DOM and do another stop. You should check the divs. I think it's called chromatic, something like that.
There are like UI diffs happening. We have the
exactly.
This snapshot diffs.
Snapshot divs, yeah.
That div the HTML. I'm not sure we have the
and also
screenshot divs.
also the styling a little bit, yeah. Like yeah. I wonder, like, is it what you're referring to when you say storybook testing, or no? It's just like the rendering of the storybook.
Currently, there's no testing with the storybook. It's just a manual tool to help you with the different scenarios. There are discussions. Maybe we should have more tests on the storybook driven. How to say that, stories? Basically, to compare, either do a UI difference, like picture difference. It's not the HTML difference. It's it takes pictures and does the div. It's more helpful for the styling, ensuring that the styling is in place. But also we could test actual scenarios there. It doesn't have to be storybook, by the way. It's just the idea that we can create mocked applications and run tests against that. And I think that some of the tests are present in the GitLab UI. They do some UI testing, but I'm not sure. I haven't checked the repo for a while. Paul, do you remember? I think they are spinning a UI tests on the GitLab UI. Do they?
Like screenshot tests?
Like the actual browser spinning and
Yeah,
testing.
yeah.
How
There are like a Cypress
yeah,
interactions.
Cypress. I forgot the name. Cypress. Yeah. Which
Yeah, we do
we
that.
could do for the applications on the front end on the GitLab main repo.
Yeah.
Is
Go ahead.
sorry, my question is the issue here is like we're finding like in the levels in the docs you just shown, like are we finding there's like additional levels we want to kind of do? So we could kind of like my first thought when you say things are slow was like because we have this all these pipeline tiers that's coming up and stuff like that is we could run different tests in different scenarios in different tiers, right? It's like if we just need additional hard and we can even in Cypress you can use a add tag, so you can only run those suite in certain environments too. So like if the so if the arguments of not doing tests right now is just to make sure like things are CI are not running forever, there's a way to like kind of mitigate that. But like I think I remember my first question. My first question is like, what is actually missing here? Is it like our current levels are not sufficient? We want an additional one where we're making a special case in here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is I don't think we need an additional level here, but I'm thinking this is a situation where my preference would be to push tests down the pyramid because tests at the top are expensive and they're expensive to maintain and they're expensive to run. So at some point, every time, but they cover a lot of code. And so at some point, though, like my return on adding a new feature test diminishes. And so if I like a unit test, I expect to see like lots of parameters. Like we've tested every single permutation of what this unit could possibly do. So unit tests, we're going to have a lot of those. And the feature tests, I really just want to make sure, hey, did everything kind of work when it was all put together? But what gets stuff is like, sometimes there are bugs that happen when there's this thing in the integration of all the components. And then you want to like, okay, I want to make sure this use case never happens again. And so it's like, yeah, we kind of cover the use case and in a feature test. But I think it's an art, and I think it's hard for me as a reviewer to be like, oh, we've crossed the line, because there is no like, it's kind of just a feeling. And so to me though, my main objective is I just want to bring up the conversation of, I want to ask the author, have you considered the cost of these tests? And if the author is like, yes, it's worth it, then it's like, okay. If it's just way outlandish, then that's also why for me is like, okay, I want to get another test engineer perspective. They're going to have a better feel of this kind of thing. And so for me, as a reviewer, sometimes I'm like, okay, no, this is the line. We got to do this. But a lot of times I'm asking a question. I just want to get the conversation started, because sometimes from asking the question is like, oh, the author's like, oh yeah, I need to do XYZ. And then it's like, okay, I just brought it up. And that way, with these kind of fuzzy things, I think the biggest thing is just to make sure that things are being considered and talked about.
I will make like one last note on this. I ran into this already in onboarding because our app is so sparse. Testing is a form of documentation. So I had MR. It went through the UX approved it. The reviewer approved it. It was on its way to the maintainer. But after the UX approved it, it triggered the next tier of pipeline. This was before this was fixed, first of all. It's now like different now. So the fast versions of the test was not running before you get the first approval before. So now it's running. But essentially what happened is once you run the fast version, I realized there's a case that was, excuse me, I was not considering. So for onboarding person, it was super helpful. That is this. I got to know the case. So that's one. Second thing is I put a feedback into the pipeline and only to realize like I missed, like it was resolved literally the day I posted about this. And the last thing over there is what I learned is because my fix fundamentally will not work in the additional cases, I actually have to move myself back to the first UX review because I had to rework the code, get the review again.
Yeah,
So I'm just sharing a different case from a different perspective.
Yeah, that is
our app is very complicated for like different flows.
Yes. And you will become very familiar with it, and you will start to be able to run the tests in your head as you commit and being like, oh wait, this is gonna break FOSS. I gotta do that.
We need to have the emoji of the old man yelling at FOSS. Do we have that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Something. Yeah. Probably.
Okay, let me put that request in. Important business.
Yeah. Have you run into the FOSS EE split stuff yet, Keon?
Not really. Nothing's come up. I mean, I got my first MR merged this morning, so I'm quite new.
Well, you could have ran into it. It could have been waiting for you.
Great.
Well, this was just a variable rename, so no feature change, nothing. So the least has the least consequences you can imagine, really.
Yeah.
But something that like popped up was quite apparent to me compared to like I've been at very small companies with up to like 50 people and a small code base. Usually, I'd make a change and then I'd run the full test route locally and maybe get some water, come back, and it's ready, it's done. And then I can see if I broke anything. Whereas I started running them here and I just gave up after a while. It's such a big project that that's not a way you can work. So I kind of like, you have to make an MR and see if it works and then go from there, which is just kind of a very different.
Unless you have to go.
I feel like I'm publishing something, making something apparent before I even know if it's done.
Oh, 100%. Unless you have to like go to the town well in the center of the marketplace to get water, like they'll get up and get water and then come back and good. It isn't gonna.
Yeah, exactly.
It's yeah, there's a lot of work on trying to get like that immediate feedback of when there's no approvals on an MR. We try to run a very predictive pipeline of, okay, what tests are related to the code that's been touched, and let's try to just run that. I mean, it still takes probably 30 minutes, but then once everything's running, I mean, it's going to take like an hour and a half. Sometimes it takes 3 hours if you're waiting for like the downstream pipelines and stuff to do its thing. Yeah, those take a long time. I'll have to step away for just one more second.
Yeah, I wonder how much that costs. Sorry.
How much it costs? Probably a lot.
Yeah, just like a single MR running for an hour and a half. That must add up. After some of the developers as well, yeah.
It does, and it's always a concern both for developers because the developers wait because the longer the MR is hanging, the more there is a chance for the conflict. The more there is interaction, and it's all our time. So there are optimizations done to that, and what Paul voiced that the time the specs run is a concern. There are certain things that I, constantly being tried to improve with the specs. I don't know, maybe we are in the realm where we need those intermediate layers between the unit tests and end-to-end tests to fasten the pipelines. One thing also is a big concern is that the code coupling. Currently, we it's hard to know what a certain change would affect. Like there are both, I think, on the back end and on the front end, the horizontal, I would say that interdependence of the modules is too heavy. And I think we can clearly say that, hey, this change would require these tests to be run, and that would be sufficient for that. So that's one of the challenges for both front end and back end, I think. And maybe digging more into that could help us improve on the speeds.
Yeah, I set up something at the previous company I was working at least for automated updates. If it's a front end change to like some low level library, you don't need to run the back end tests. And if it's just a back end gem being updated, you don't need to run the front end. There are places like that. That's pretty basic, but you can get into a lot more advanced there and prevent having to run a lot of code. But it's risky. Like you can mess it up and then miss out on things.
I remember that recently we introduced some tiers of the pipelines. Paul, can you describe what's happening there?
Well, I think everybody's always normally we've always shed tiers with the pipeline, so I'm not sure what is new. Yeah, no, I think this is more like it's like adding another level of the predictive tests. So it's like if it has one approval but not maintainer in Mars, we'll move it up a tier. Or if I want to get all the feedback right away, I'll say I was on tier. I would a certain pipeline tier of for it to merge, it has to run this. There's a pre-merge check of we got to run this tier before we can merge it. I have a feeling it's still kind of, work in progress. Is going to look different. So that's one thing about GitLab is engineering productivity is doing a lot to try to improve the developer experience. But sometimes that means our pipeline interactions, they change a lot, our way of interfacing with the pipeline. So and this is just with our own project. Obviously we're a very special GitLab user where it's a huge, crazy project.
While you were out, Paul, I mentioned that we had crazy code coupling. Maybe as we properly separate the models and enforce their separation, maybe we could seek for optimizations in the pipelines. Also, maybe we could have another round of conversation about having UI component tests running on the applications, maybe. Yeah, everything has its costs. Like adding more specs needs more development time. There are trade-offs.
And sometimes, in certain places, it can speed up development time because if you're missing tests at a certain level, and there's so much coupling and in the code base that you're working on, it can be very difficult to keep verifying things manually or knowing what's possible. I'm curious to see if we're good talking about this one. I'd like to hear about your interesting review class. It sounds interesting.
Oh, it's all it's all about code coupling. Give me a sec. I'll open the EMR. So yeah, it was a community contribution. We have a case where when we create a blank new repo, we give some instructions for the user to fulfill that repo, basically add in folder, configuring the remotes, etc. And the customer wants to add a customer user wants to add their clipboard button, so it would be similar to all other markdown, for example, renders that we have. So yeah, the MR simply adds that. The issues that they ran into. So first of all, they had a lot of just basic linter fixes that they had to do because they touched the relevant files. They had to touch that also. And the MR was bigger initially, and then I started digging into the code, and there turned out to be a lot of couple things. Let me scroll to the to my review. So what I found initially that the developer wanted to create mock the behavior of this copy button, but by just adding a lot of classes and our special copy code button there, which was kind of mimicking what's happening with the markdown rendering. So initially I thought, hey, maybe we should just move this file to markdown, and it would be easier for everyone to maintain that and just render that and get everything we have for the markdown automatically. But there was one minor thing that both author and I missed, which was a JS clone class, just little class, that actually does a thing, and it's crazy. It turns out that on the mobile when we switch the way we copy we basically say that clone the repo. So there's a SSH and HTTP way, and when we switch on mobile, when we click on either of these buttons, we actually switch the instructions here. So you see here the instruction switch. We have this feature. I wonder why we don't have that for desktop. There is a separate request to have that actually. But yeah, that's another story. But it turned out that we can't do the markdown. We can't follow the original path that the author took because they did some trickery that just had to drop this class. So yeah, markdown won't work. I found an issue that actually our specs seem to be ignoring this case. They as far, if I'm reading this right, previously we had clone class, which we probably moved to JS clone, because on the front end we tried to mark I'd say that classes that we add for JS interactability, we tend to prefix them with JS, but it's not.
This doesn't have any styling associated with it.
Currently we have it as JS clone, and I imagine that at some point of time it was clone, and basically when we renamed that, this didn't. This test wasn't longer covering that, because we have this each do, and basically each is empty array.
Oh wait, so is clone not even a thing?
Yeah. So this test was no longer valid because we didn't update the clone class when we updated that one.
I see.
So for historical reasons, I think it's relatively recent that we started to mark clone classes, not just clone, but JS clone. If it adds interactability, we say that it's we prefix that with JS. So that's a discovery also of this code, and I started digging around, and it turns out that we have pretty much the same functionality that the user was seeking. I'm sorry, the Zoom tools are crazy. They get into the way, and I can't properly find them out. So yeah, we have a custom class. Basically, when the user was adding a copy code element. We have a custom element for that. But again, code coupling, this one requires a JS syntax highlight to be on the code section for some reason. So yeah, we had a discussion whether we need that or not. And there was several paths suggested. Phil helped a lot. He suggested another way to add those buttons. So yeah, we had a discussion with the contributor, and currently there's a trade-off, two solutions. We left that for the contributor to choose. Basically, I tried to also encourage the contributor, especially the external one, to have the iteration, even if there are follow-ups. That's fine. If it improves the code, yeah, we can merge that and move on and cover, for example, dropping the need for JS syntax highlighting later. So yeah, it's a, I think this review highlights how our code is coupled. Like I had to search for
paper towel.
I had to search for the JS clone in the code base, what it does. I had to search for the copy code where it's defined, how it is defined. Yeah. And it's all, quite loosely coupled. And that's one of the issues during the reviews. Yeah, that's the story.
Yeah, that's and so the final solution that they landed on was using JS syntax highlight.
The selector that adds the copy button requires the JS highlight. I suggested that we follow with that, but we create a follow-up to drop the requirement for JS highlight on the clone button, because it's weird that they are related. They don't have to be.
Yeah, the only reason like we would need that is if somehow the markdown rendering uses those classes. So you'll see those other classes show up without that JS syntax highlight, and we don't want to add the button there. So we're only trying to select just a subset of those. That would be the
definitely
situation.
So yeah, that's why I didn't want to drop the requirement of that from the JS button code in this MR, because it would require some testing.
Way out of scope.
We could add another like JS manual copy button class that would that we would create from scratch, and we would use that for selectors.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's a good example of and I know it's a challenge sometimes when the community contributors solved the problem, but you could tell they kind of like they just did what they knew was available, and sometimes just copying what I see and just getting it working is like, okay, we're good to go now. But there's 5 different ways the copy code could have been added. We want to try to use, the standard way of doing that. Is it using the JS function still in that MR, or is it doing it all in the YAML?
So at the end, when Phil shared his opinion, there were two ways, and I said that, hey, I'm fine with either way, either JS approach or adding that manually via the YAML. And I let the contributor to choose, and just saying that, hey, if we go either way, there are follow-ups for that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing.
Where can I find this code for JS clone?
I'll share again my screen.
I'm like, is this just my search is really bad? It's in the GitLab repo.
Let me find that. I think I haven't left this one. I haven't left the link for that.
Yeah, that's what I searched. Because I just
so yeah. So this little thing does the switch here, and it seems to be only working for the mobile. So when that link that I show the link here is clicked.
Mm-hmm.
We do a change of the URL on the instructions, and instructions, that's why we need basically injection here that we say we can't render that with the markdown because we need this wrapper on the around the text of the URL. So this URL is actually wrapped in a span with this JS clone class, which is also weird naming. And when this switch happens, this function that I just shown switches that text.
Whatever the URL of the link was.
Yeah.
That's what we
So,
switch all of those with the,
yeah.
I see.
And this behavior is only present on the mobile, which is crazy. And the spec that I shared just before, it wasn't covering that because at some point I imagined we switched from clone to JS clone, but we didn't update this spec. Yeah, it's super complicated. And
Yeah,
imagine me
weird.
explaining all that to the contributor who's an outsider and trying to improve our code base.
All they want is a button to copy.
I think you explained it pretty well. Like, and it's like, and yeah, sometimes writing those comments is interesting when it's like, okay, there's like 4 different things going on here. And so we're just gonna dump, but here's all the issues. Here's kind of what I think we should do. And like that kind of comment happens a lot. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, we have a little bit of time left. This is a good time to keep chatting if there's anything that someone wants to talk about related to code review. Or we can pair up on reviewing some code and actually just do some code review while we're here. What's your old preference?
Well,
Do you have?
well, I don't have any code to review being so new here, but I would be happy to. And it's fun, and you'll be doing front end, but I'd still be happy to watch how you review some code and see if I can follow along on the front end stuff.
Yeah. What do you all want to do? Chow and Cost, do you all have some codes to reviews or?
I don't have a MAR ready for review, so if you have something, I would be happy to watch that.
Okay, let's all right, I've got a bunch. I love it when I can get my work done on this call. So this is exactly what I'm hoping for. All right, let me share my screen. Let me go here. Okay. So I've got a handful of codes to review. I'm going to cherry pick one that is interesting, but it's failing now. Oh no. Why are you failing? Why are you failing? I wanted you to pass because I wanted to merge you because I was holding you up. Oh, what is this? Oh my goodness. Oh no, there's got to be some flaky pipeline stuff. Run external command. This sounds like a retry kind of situation. All right. So this MR, I had already done a review. This was one of those MRs that I have this weird experience of having been a front-end maintainer for so long. There's front-end changes to MR, but I'm getting asked to review the test part of it. I was like, okay, all right, let's do it. And this one was interesting. I think you all would think this as an interesting case. So previously we had the test check for you can't see the whole diff here, but it would check the value of these inputs and then it would refresh the page and do the exact same expectation afterwards. And that just really struck me because it's like, what's gonna change after refreshing the page? Like the only thing I can imagine changing would be the front end is doing something weird. And then that kind of sounds like we need a front end test. So my brain of like keeping the test performant is like that's concern is looming. And so I'm just asking the questions like to me, I wasn't seeing the reason for needing this. But then they linked the issue. And the issue is interesting because when these params exist, merged after and merged before, when they exist in the URL, it seems like because of a time zone issue, it would keep incrementing them. And so the situation was the steps to reproduce include reloading the page. And so it's like every time you
Oh,
reload, every
do
time
they?
you go ahead,
Sorry, are they saved anywhere between the reloads? So how
they would
does
be in
the
the
increase
URL.
happens?
They show up in the
Oh,
URL params.
oh, right.
So what would happen first is I would visit without URL params, like in a normal flow. I'd visit without the URL params. Some filtering happens that automatically adds the URL params. And then every time I refresh, it
Time zone bugs are nasty.
yeah, oh yeah. So um but to me, I see even though like the steps to reproduce are written as reloading, it's like that's not the main issue. The main issue was whenever these exist in the parameters. And that was the conclusion of this thread. And the way that and I was not really, I just wanted to double check with them of like as I read this, it seems like overkill to use the page refresh. But if we're really, really concerned about the use case, then like maybe we can keep it, I guess. And um my example back was so I wanted to show like, okay, what's a sufficient test for catching the bug? And so I reverted the fix um and then removed the page refresh things. And by reverting the fix, these tests still failed. And to me, that like proves like, oh, this test alone would have been enough to catch the bug. So uh yeah, sounds like Rudy went ahead and removed page refresh. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Like if we're good with removing that. For me, I was still like just asking questions. I wasn't sure if we wanted to or not.
So
This part was confusing for me.
so the idea is that when the page loads, there is, for example, I don't know, end of the day, 1st January, and the if the time zone is different by many hours, the inputs would have a 2nd January, for example.
Yeah. So every time the query parameters existed, uh, so they're like here, and then when it's refreshed, it would like keep increasing the time just on a page reload because those parameters exist. So to me, it was like, okay, but we can just do a single visit with the parameters existing and make sure that that works. We don't have to keep refreshing the page, you know. What's that?
I mean,
What's that proof by induction thing? That's some sort of math thing. What were you saying, Klaus?
so currently the URL params are read by the inputs, and the inputs reflect the update to the URL params automatically. Is that the case?
So the
And
issue
do we
would
have
yeah.
do we have to change the inputs to update the URL params?
No. You do not have to
So
change the
it
input.
automatically on the
Yes.
page load, it updates the URL. That's what I was asking. So
Yeah.
we are loading the page, we see we basically wait for the URL params to be updated and then check them again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And honestly, so it's like, as I'm reviewing this, I don't know. And it's like I'm not testing, I'm not really familiar with this part of the product even. And but I gotta keeping that in context is helpful. I could kind of I didn't have to dive too deep into what's actually going on for my review. Sometimes just ask, and so that's why I do really lean on just asking questions to optimize my time. But it did really stick out to me when I read this and I saw what was going on. I was like, oh, but the test is different than their user flow. The user flow visits the page empty with no params and then has to reload. But we in our test are always visiting with the params. So we could assert our with params visit effective or not. But anyways, yeah, I think this is good to go now. So let's get it merged. All right. So this is okay. So yeah, the last change was just a little bit ago. It was removing this bit. Cool. Yes. Let's double check that commit. Make sure. Yeah. Cool. Oh, brilliant. Yes. Lovely. So if I look at this one at the bottom, yeah, cool. I love it. All right. Let's get it merged. Thanks for working on this. Changes look good to me. Moving and starting merge. All right. Up. We're gonna go with Splatoon GIF.
And I always wondered where do you get these GIFs? I thought you you are using the GIF, yeah, and you have the wall marks.
Yeah, I've got
The Giphy app no longer works because they don't generate the copy links directly. Doesn't give you the doc.
Oh, really?
Small complaints. Yeah, it's like so. I always review with GIFs, and I learned recently if you just use the Giphy app and copy the link from it, the link is no longer end with .gif, and Markdown doesn't take it.
Wow.
So I need to do what Paul does now. I need to collect GIFs and use them.
That's what I do. Yes. Yeah.
Or we build our own plugin. That's the only two ways.
Yeah, I want to create like a GitLab pages site with a whole bunch of GIFs for like everyone to share. That's been on the back of my head. That's a one day kind of thing. All right, I'm hoping that that one pipeline failure was a flake. So let's I then drag this over here so I can kind of keep it on it. Okay, let's go to another one. I'm not gonna do this one. This one will be a good one.
I do have a bit of a thought on the previous one. It's not relevant because we removed that because you removed that extra test in the end, or the extra reload. But I think the issue was more, since you had to ask, it wasn't very apparent in the test either why that was happening.
Yeah.
And that may be fine because you've figured it out. But when that gets moved somewhere else and gets changed a little, and then 2 years later, I need to look at it. I think I would look at it and say, like, I don't know why we're reloading, and I'd just remove it. Or I'd be too afraid to change it, which is also bad, or I'd just remove it. And I think that shows that you probably either want to explain the reasoning in the test, or maybe this is one of those cases where a comment explaining why would have been valuable if that was ended up being needed.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that was kind of my first call to action was like, I might be missing something really obvious, but when I just scan over this, I didn't know. So it's like, could we leave a comment in the code because that's definitely the situation I'm also concerned about, because it's like, yeah, I would go through it and be like, what in the world? What is this test doing? Yeah. Oh, the pipeline did fail. Okay. What is going on there? Oh no, the merge train failed. Oh wait.
Oh, it happened to me and to someone else recently that the merge pipeline fails. For me, it said that the main pipeline didn't finish, which is crazy. And
so I
think the solution
for a second, but I'm back
Oh,
now.
sorry. Yeah, it looks like the pipeline. Yeah, this finished. I guess I didn't know why it doesn't like.
Can you check the status there? Yeah. Oh,
Ah, ah,
for
9 hours
me,
versus 8 hours. Can't believe.
for me, it said that the pipeline didn't finish, and that's why MVPS
Right.
didn't, which is weird.
That is weird.
What does that message mean? The one we were just looking at, 9 versus 9, 8 hours.
That's a good question. So
Can I do Minecraft?
that's fine. So in our ever changing development environment of pipelines, we have just enabled merge trains on the main project, and these are previously, if I say merge or merge when complete, pipeline finishes, boom, it's merged right away. Merge train is where we're gonna run all of the pipeline, we're gonna run all the MRs that are ready to merge. We're gonna run the pipelines in step, because one situation that can happen is a pipeline passes for all my MRs and I merge them all, but in the intersection of some of those MRs that would have caused issues. So merge trains ensure that your pipeline should always stay green, because upon merging, it's not actually going to merge right away. It's going to kind of sit in a queue, and then we merge, run a pipeline, merge, run a pipeline, merge, run a pipeline, and that's kind of what happens in merge train land. It's more performant than the way I described it, but so we just enabled merge trains, but they don't actually do that behavior. All they run right now are just these pre-merge checks. And so we have a number of, like, our organization rules of like, hey, we want to make sure we have a recent pipeline run for this thing. So we're just going to not allow it to be merged unless this thing was recently run. Or I don't know, if the pipeline's got to be finished. And in Cos's example, it was finished, but for some reason this thing failed. So yeah, I think we're working on something, but probably a little annoying right now.
So the last like run that you had in the pipeline tab, I would thought, since you rerun one of the, I don't know what's the correct word, sub
I
jobs in
I
there,
reran the job.
would have triggered it as like a rerun, but I guess it's not like a full run. So that was too long for it.
That was a little I kind of agree, but
Okay.
yeah, it wants a full fresh run. That's okay. I don't worry about it too much unless it gets really annoying. Then I start complaining. That's when you hear me rant for an hour on these calls, but I'm okay right now. Yeah, we're running up on time. There's one interesting thing here. There's some interesting changes here, I thought. This is all front end stuff. But it's still pretty straightforward. So we were removing something that wasn't being referenced. It's not referenced in this component at all, but it looks like we had another reference to setting this prop. So I was just like, oh, hey, can we remove that? And that looks like that's been updated. And then we were adding, we were changing some of the conditions here for like when we do this edit branch rules thing. So this one is interesting. Let me think. Is there absolutely any difference between the two conditions that we have here?
doesn't look like.
Between the ternary and the condition?
I think
I don't
they're
think it's
the same.
Yeah, I think they're the same, right?
It looks like, but it's always tricky. It looks nice.
This is where I pull out the AI. I asked it if it's the same.
Oh, let's do that.
Um,
Okay.
Oh,
You know what? And let's test our little buddies.
Sorry, this is my work. And then
This is great.
but there
I would
there is a key difference because the ternary is more readable, but the ternary also has double negatives in it, which is the cognitive
negatives.
load of this. The cognitive load of this like 50 characters are very high.
Yeah.
Maybe just if statement with a return would be
I
more.
would 100% if it out.
Don't trust AI.
We're gonna see. We're gonna see what it says. Are these two lines effectively the same?
They want to steal our jobs. They would,
Sure.
false. Be false positive.
All right, what are you gonna say? No, these two lines are not. Let's break them down. I thought they would.
True.
No, that's not what I was asking you. Of course they're different.
I think if you ask if it's logically the same, it might give a better answer.
Next is prompt engineering.
All right, it says
I'm pretty sure they're the same.
It says
how
the
they
key difference
handle
is how
is
they handle
falsy.
case when is branch
rule
is
falsy.
false. In the first line,
second,
it always returns not can edit. It may
right, because it's double ampersand. I think.
what? And the second line, if is false, it may still return true. What are you talking about?
So if that's false, the left side is false. But the return could be false if whatever on the pipe on the right is truthy. Basically.
I think.
See, that's why we don't do this. This is too much. We if it out.
Yes. Okay. Yes, it has confused AI. This is a bad response. I need to save this because it's wrong. It was saying, no, they're not the same because in this case, it could return this. And in this case, it'll return this. So that means it's not the same. That was its response.
Sorry, guys, I got another call.
Yeah,
so
thanks for chatting, everybody.
Nice
All right, I appreciate it. I always love the opportunity to throw shade on.
Can we ask the author why did they change this?
Yeah,
anyway,
it's probably a good idea. Well, yeah, I mean, in this situation, I'm not sure. I don't know if I would block. I think I would just leave it like non-blocking because.
Oh yeah, sure. It's just weird.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, thanks you all. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.